Very happy to introduce Dr. Salman Khetani, who's coming to speak with us from UIC. And we heard a story earlier today about someone starting in academia and then moving to industry and having a unique perspective on biomaterials research because of that. And Dr. Khetani has done just the opposite. So he started a company right after your PhD or postdoc? Postdoc in the Boston area, and now has come back to academia. And you can see how that really impacts his approach to work and to making biomaterials that are not only innovative, right, but also scalable and reproducible with that in mind. And that's another goal of our education and outreach group, is to think about how we can do that better. So join me in welcoming Dr. Khetani.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to share my work. I will say that the experience, it was a short experience. It was 4 years in a startup, but it really did transform me as an academic and the way I train my students to build things that are actually useful to the end user and not just papers themselves. So I was asked to talk about some of these challenges that we face to try to get these engineered tissues or biomaterial-based tissues in the marketplace. So I specifically selected a couple here. And everything I'm going to show you today is actually from my lectures. I teach a cell and tissue engineering lab class, and I'm showing those slides to kind of show you sort of how I go about educating undergrads and grads. And so when we think about engineered tissues, really whether they have biomaterials or they're just sort of naturally formed, these are the things that we think about. So I'm not going to read through all the text, but first thing we think about is functionality, right? I mean, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter how good an engineered tissue is if it's not functional. And when we think about functionality, we think about how does it correlate to clinical outcomes, whether it's for a drug screen or whether it's in terms of healing a certain organ. The second is usability. One thing I learned in industry is that when we develop technologies, we're developing it for the non-technologists, the clinicians, the physicians, the pharmaceutical scientists. And I cannot tell you how painful of a lesson I learned in trying to figure out what I thought was very easy to do was very difficult for them to do, or what I thought my students should be doing, somebody in industry who's working 8 to 5 is not going to do, right? In terms of, so I think the usability aspect was really apparent when I started my company. The throughput, I mean, at least for drug screening, which is what I focus on quite a bit, the throughput matters a lot. And I think when a lot of these models are developed and they are sort of n=1 or n=3 and you can't do dozens and dozens of devices, I think it really does limit adoption in the marketplace. Modularity as well. One thing I continue to hear in this space with engineered tissues is that they're made so specific and they're made so for the specific case that they're needed, that there's no ability to add biological or technological complexity. There's no ability for them to be modular. And I think this is something that, at least from my own perspective and my research and my students, we really try to teach them that systems should be as modular as possible so that you can plug and play depending on the end use. Compatibility. I mean, if we take an example for drug screening, we're all addicted to plastic. I mean, let's be real, right? We're all addicted to plastic. There's a reason for that. It's because pharmaceutical companies have invested hundreds of millions of dollars in infrastructure to handle plastic plates or glass. And sometimes to get initial market adoption, you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. You actually have to build something that can get into their infrastructure and then build from that. So that's another important lesson we learned. And then the rest is pretty obvious: reproducibility and cost. When we started our company, we were charging a price that we thought was something that pharmaceutical companies would pay because they have deep pockets. And they came up to me and they said, the company might have deep pockets, but our little division, we have a budget. So you can't just break that budget with the cost you're charging. So we learned it the hard way, that we really had to convince them of the value proposition and bring the cost to a point where they would actually buy it. Anyways, these are things that we talk about in my class, and I'll give you one example. This is from a recent publication. The QR code, I doubt you can scan it. It's so low here. But anyways, this just came out literally 2 weeks ago. And so I'm going to walk you through like I do in my class. If you think about cells and biomaterials, often people do them manually, right? They mix them up manually, they dispense them in some sort of a device, and that can lead to a lot of variability. If you think about organoids, right? People dispense organoids in Matrigel and a plate. That can lead to a lot of variability in terms of usability and throughput, and as well as reproducibility. So one way we have addressed this is by merging microfluidics with generation of engineered tissue. So this is a droplet microfluidic device where you have cells and collagen. It doesn't have to be collagen. It can be decellularized matrix. It can be Matrigel, depending on the flavor of the day. Cells and collagen are coming in one stream, and then oil is coming in from a T-junction. And obviously, water and oil separate, so we get these droplets. And the size of the droplets is dictated by the size of the microfluidic device. It can be extremely reproducible. It's super high throughput. We're generating these in the tens of thousands in a matter of half an hour. And then once we get these droplets, we can polymerize them with just basic heat in this case. And then we can dispense them in multi-well plates. I'll show you an example where you can use it as a bioink as well. And really, they are quite reproducible, and they're very high throughput. And this is something that now we do routinely, not just for liver. This is a liver example, but we do that actually for a variety of different organ systems. This is just data actually showing the reproducibility. So you can see that the diameter histogram is fairly tight for something that, by the way, these are primary human hepatocytes or iPS-derived human hepatocytes, so pretty complicated cell types. We're not talking about just a cell line. So you can see the diameter is pretty tight. The encapsulation rate is fairly tight. And then if you track the cultures over 2 weeks, you can see how reproducible the diameters are depending on whether you're coating the cells with another cell type or just keeping the hepatocytes in the matrix itself. Functionally, right, so what I showed you was reproducibility. Functionally, you can see that here, if we just encapsulate iPS-derived hepatocytes in these droplets, they don't mature. They're functioning at a low level. But if we coat this with the endothelial layer to create that compartmentalization the way you have in the body, now suddenly the functionality goes up while still allowing for that reproducibility. Well, we also discovered that it's not the type of endothelial cell matters. So if you think about cells and biomaterials, not every cell is going to respond the same way. In this case, if we take HUVECs versus liver endothelial cells, the response of the iPS hepatocytes is very different, showing that it's not just the material, it's not just the fabrication technique, but it's that close cellular interaction that needs to be studied and harnessed for any sort of therapy or any sort of drug screening platform. We can take this as a bioink because it's so reproducible, because we can generate tens of thousands. With Ramil Shah, who left, who gave a talk earlier, we can actually bioprint these in a gelatin construct. We can show similar sort of functional responses in these bioprinted constructs, and then we can implant them. So this is an implantation where after 30 days we were able to excise the tissue out, the microtissues are there, they're beginning to form vasculature as well. So this is just showing you an example of how we took microfluidics, made our biomaterial constructs more reproducible, and then we're able to use them in few different contexts, either to mature iPS hepatocytes or to bioprint them in this construct. So let's get to how we put this in the UIC curriculum. So I'm at UIC in case that wasn't clear. And so we have 3 courses that we have in our curriculum. These are required courses for our cell and tissue engineering track. The first course is a standard biomaterials course. The second is cell and tissue engineering, theory of cell and tissue engineering with various examples. And then I teach a lab class. And in all of these classes, we try to coordinate across the 3 instructors to focus on these essential requirements for engineering tissues that I just walked you through. And then my lab class, I just kind of put a little laundry list here that I teach in the lab class to try to give us students a fairly robust education on cell and tissue engineering. Now, I also teach another class called Quantitative Human Physiology, which is similar to what you teach. And I really enjoyed your approach. I will say, though, running a 15-people lab, teaching 3 courses, being the associate head and the director of graduate studies, I would literally not have time to make those videos unless what Sarah said was correct. What I try to do, however, in a former life, I was probably a comedian. It's not apparent today. What I try to do is is really engage the students with eye contact, not reading through the slides, and try to do Q&A, where they get to provide input in what's going on. And that's my approach to try to keep them engaged and try to come to class. I do agree that having some sort of informational videos before they come to class would make the class time a little bit more streamlined, and you can do more things with it. But that's my strategy, and at least for our students, that seems to work reasonably well. I think my 10 minutes are up. Okay, that's it. Thank you.